चुनाव आयुक्त की चमत्कारिक नियुक्ति, लोकतंत्र की नई परिभाषा। सुप्रीम कोर्ट का फैसला आए या ना आए, सरकार का फैसला पहले से तैयार रहता है। भारत में लोकतंत्र की परिभाषा दिन ब दिन बदल रही है। एक समय था जब चुनाव आयोग जैसी संवैधानिक संस्थाओं को निष्पक्षता का प्रतीक माना जाता था, लेकिन अब तो सरकार ही फैसला ले लेती है और फिर देखा जाता है कि कोर्ट और विपक्ष क्या करेगा। चुनाव आयुक्त की तेजी से की गई नियुक्ति। चलिए जरा समझते हैं कि मामला क्या है। कांग्रेस समेत पूरा विपक्ष सुप्रीम कोर्ट में चुनाव आयोग की नियुक्ति पर सवाल उठा रहा था। मामला अदालत में था, लेकिन सरकार ने किसी की प्रतीक्षा किए बिना ज्ञानेश कुमार को नया मुख्य चुनाव आयुक्त बना दिया था। सुप्रीम कोर्ट की सुनवाई जारी चल रही थी, लेकिन सरकार को इंतजार करने की क्या जरूरत। सरकार के हिसाब से जो करना है वो बाद में देखेंगे, पहले अपना आदमी बिठा दो। विपक्ष की आपत्ति और सरकार की तेजी। कांग्रेस समेत कई विपक्षी दलों ने इस पर कड़ा एतराज किया। विपक्ष का कहना है कि जब मामला सुप्रीम कोर्ट में लंबित था तब इतनी जल्दबाजी क्यों। लेकिन ये सवाल पूछे कौन और सुनेगा कौन। सरकार को तो जैसे पहले से ही पता था कि आखिर में जो हम चाहेंगे वही होगा। विपक्ष चीखता और चिल्लाता रह गया, लेकिन सरकार ने एक झटके में अपना काम कर दिया। चुनाव आयोग या सरकारी एजेंसी। अब एक और दिलचस्प बात सामने आ रही है। चुनाव आयोग कभी निष्पक्ष संस्था मानी जाती थी, लेकिन अब हालात ऐसे हो गए हैं कि लोग पूछ रहे हैं, क्या चुनाव आयोग सरकार के अधीन एक विभाग बन चुका है। बीते कुछ सालों में ये देखा गया कि चुनाव आयोग के फैसले सरकार की लाइन से मेल खाते हैं, चाहे किसी पार्टी की मान्यता खत्म करनी हो या किसी राज्य के चुनाव की तारीखें तय करनी हो। सब कुछ सत्ता की सहूलियत के हिसाब से होता दिखता है। पहले कानून बदला, फिर नियुक्ति कर दी। आपको याद होगा कि पहले चुनाव आयोग की नियुक्ति के लिए प्रधानमंत्री, विपक्ष के नेता और मुख्य न्यायाधीश की कमेटी थी, लेकिन सरकार ने झट से कानून बदल दिया और अब नियुक्ति की जिम्मेदारी सिर्फ प्रधानमंत्री और उनके मंत्री के हाथ में रह गई। यानी खेल हमारा, खिलाड़ी हमारे और अंपायर भी हमारा। फिर निष्पक्ष चुनाव की उम्मीद किससे करें। सुप्रीम कोर्ट में सुनवाई जारी, पर सरकार मास्टर स्ट्रोक खेल चुकी है। अब विपक्ष सुप्रीम कोर्ट में अपनी बातें रखता रहेगा, लेकिन सरकार को अपना काम करना था, कर दिया। मास्टर स्ट्रोक खेल चुकी वो। विपक्ष का हाल कुछ ऐसा है, अरे सुनो तो सही सरकार, हमने सुन लिया लेकिन किया वही जो हमें करना था। लोकतंत्र बचा या सिर्फ नाम का रह गया। अब सवाल ये उठता है, क्या ये लोकतंत्र है? क्या सरकार का चुनाव आयोग पर इस तरह का निर्णय सही है? क्या एक निष्पक्ष चुनाव आयुक्त नियुक्त करने का सपना सही रह जाएगा? क्या अब जो चुनाव होंगे वो जायज होंगे, वो सही होंगे? क्या चुनाव आयोग बीजेपी के पक्ष में खड़ा नहीं दिखाई देगा, जो पहले से हो भी रहा था? आखिर में जनता क्या करे? जनता के पास अब दो ही रास्ते हैं, या तो वो इसे सामान्य बात मानकर चुप बैठ जाए, या फिर सवाल पूछे कि आखिर ये लोकतंत्र किस दिशा में जा रहा है। लेकिन अगर जनता सवाल नहीं पूछेगी तो लोकतंत्र भी धीरे धीरे सिर्फ किताबों में ही रह जाएगा।
Because I repeat, nothing is a greater anathema to the world of commerce as unpredictability. This constant flip-flop, change, etc. is actually a greater danger. Two parties have decided that we can go to court.
I don't think that argument, the last argument works, because the commercial world also wants certainty in litigation.
Yes,
and not continuity of litigation.
Well,
that's the argument of the other side is, why do you expect courts will not be able to be appropriately apply the law, even if it is modification, in cases where there is need and strictly within the four corners of law, without going into the merits of the matter, without going into the rewriting the award. In those limited set of, they are not asking that it can be court can sit in a judgment in an appeal, and as was suggested in some of the cases, in one or two cases there is suggestion, but most of the advocates on the other side have never said that we should become the appellate body. Nobody said that, except probably in public policy matters relating to NHAI.
Well, the question is not as to what is desirable.
Nobody's arguing.
It is a question of what is the law. That's what I am on.
Let me put it very clearly. As far as commerce is concerned, that may not be. The first argument of yours, that if we have adopted the jurisdictional model,
yes,
and the intent of the legislature was to exactly take up the municipal model. Then setting aside doesn't include modification. To some extent, maybe right.
So look, again, just as a legal framework, is just put it back, skeleton of legal framework. You can't add words to a statute. You can give. I'm just finishing my point. Second is you can read modification into setting aside if the words itself have some ambiguity and permit for that. I'm argued that is not the case. That is not possible. There is no ambiguity in the meaning of the word setting aside. Through no process of interpretation can we read variation into the setting aside. That's the second point. Third point, Milad, is whether the greater includes the lesser. Milad. In another way, Milad, I suppose, of saying that the word setting aside may include variation or modification, even if the golden rule of interpretation, which is read the words as they are, is not to be taken, and that was also argued by the other side, is through some form of purposive interpretation, that you interpret the words of a statute so as to effectuate the policy behind it. That has been a substratum of a large part of the argument of the other side. But I'll say some things to that. One, that principle can only be adopted when there is an ambiguity in the words of a statute. It cannot be adopted generally. Where is the ambiguity in the word setting aside? It's as clear as daylight. It's clear, Millet, to us in 85, in 96, to this court, Millet, in Hakeem, to Redfern and Hunter, to every country across the world, which was given a separate power for modification. So they know what setting aside means. It is clear to our legislature in 1908 in the CPC when they say there's a different power. To all authorities so far, these two powers have been seen as distinct, and setting aside means setting aside. It's English language. So therefore, there is no scope of a purposive interpretation. Then if my note is to be seen, then assuming a purposive interpretation is to be adopted, then two things need to happen. First, you determine what is the policy of the act. And second is to ask yourself as to whether the interpretation being sought to be offered will further that policy of the act. Both things, then purposive interpretation, my laws will do these two tests. What is the policy of the act? Very often it has been said that, look, it becomes very expensive, very expensive. No part of the arbitration exercise is to make it cheaper for parties. It is well known that arbitration is more expensive. What is important and has always been stated in every judgment of this court, including the Stamp Act judgment, if need be, I'll refer to it, is the policy of the Arbitration Act is twofold. One is minimum judicial interference, embodied in Section 5. And the second is expedition. Expedition and non-interference. And Millet, I would dare say that non-interference is a concept which is in furtherance of expedition. But if non-interference is the purpose of the act and expedition is the purpose of the act, one, I would say, leave the expense of the parties away. Parties know when they choose that they're going to arbitration that they may come with a situation where the award is set aside and they'll have to restart it. They do that in commerce. It is not a problem. It is parties well know that. Yet they choose to opt out of a general judicial system and go to arbitration. So let's expense, please leave out of it. The consideration of expense, parties are presumably factored into their own mind when signing that contract, because it is party autonomy. Parties know what they're doing. So the question is, Millet, of expedition. Millet, if legislature says Section 5 in furtherance of expedition, I dare say the question will then come to the second part of the purpose of interpretation test is whether modification and the power of modification will expedite the process or further retard it. By reference to three examples coming from other side, think, look in my case, modification would have quelled the litigation there and then, forgets the fact that it would, I repeat, in this court it may quell it because there is no further ground of appeal. If that power is to be exercised by every single trial court, even the high courts will exercise a trial jurisdiction when they have original side. But it is also exercised by district courts in every country. In every court in this country, there will be an application of modification, no matter what guardrails my lord gives of curable, incurable, this, that. Every party will say, well, look, this is a curable defect, cure it. You can do it. The other party will say, either you should not have cured it, it is inappropriate, or it is not a curable defect. There will be one round of litigation which will go on that alone. Because I give, again, the salutary example of
that may not be correct for a simple reason. The power to modify will only arise in case the first the court forms a conclusion that the award is patently wrong or contrary to public policy, and therefore it's liable to be set aside. First, you have to form that conclusion.
और आप हमसे जुड़े रहने के लिए सब्सक्राइब करें YouTube पर, फॉलो करें Twitter पर और लाइक करें Facebook पर। और ज्यादा जानकारी के लिए आपको टाइप करना होगा सिर्फ न्यूज़ नशा।